I'm Jennifer, and I worked with Luca and Victoria, and together we decided to come up with the Cancer Finder system. So some motivation that we had for designing this product was that according to cancer research from the UK, there were 17 million cases and 9.6 million deaths worldwide due to cancer worldwide in 2018. Additionally, it is alarming because by the year 2040 there will be a 62 increase, meaning that the cancer cases will jump to 27.5 million from 2018 to 2040. Although on the positive side, the death rate has declined throughout the years, with a decrease of 26% from 1991 to 2018, there still remains a lot of work to be done. So one of the main problems when detecting cancer is that the only way to really detect early is using early testing and diagnosis. However, that ends up being those early screening offers tend to not be as accurate, and they often lead to not being able to detect the cancer pretty early. So it brings a lot of challenges with it as well, such as exposure to radiation. We have false positives, there's false negatives, and overdiagnosis. So essentially, having a better diagnostic tool that would be able to detect cancer early would be revolutionary and would reap a lot of benefits in helping to tackle this cancer problem. The second challenge when it comes to cancer, other than being able to detect it early, would be being able to treat it. So as of now, treatment comes in various forms such as surgery, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, transplant, chemotherapy, among others, which could be helpful but also extremely damaging to the patient and the immune system. And most importantly, often cost is a great barrier between people trying to get better with cancer and feeling like they're going in debt. Some of these treatments may cost this cancer patient $12,000 a year, which makes sense why people who are suffering from cancer, patients tend to be they tend to be more likely to go bankrupt than healthy people. Based on the challenges in screening and treatment of cancer worldwide, our group focused on designing a nanorobotic system or molecule that flows in the blood and selectively attaches to cancer, which would allow the doctors to detect early signs of cancer, and once diagnosed would be even able to treat it in a very targeted and non-invasive way. We would also focus on making the system very affordable, since cost tends to be one of the very important barriers in getting everyone to get help and be able to afford the treatment. Also, in this way, we would be designing a device that targets a subset of cancers that are detectable and treatable through the blood. While this is only a subset of cancer types, we would also be looking at larger populations, and this would include cancers such as liver, breast, pancreatic, thyroid, ovarian, lung, and among many others. So after we solidified what our goal was and what we wanted to do, we decided to see our stakeholders, and we came up with this list of main stakeholders and kind of their values. So as you can see, we have cancer patients, cancer patient families, pharmaceutical and biotech companies, insurance companies, U.S. Food and Drug Administrations, the National Institute of Health, doctors and physicians, and their values, as you can see, they tend to overlap. Like, for example, cancer patients and patient families are going to care about health, safety, costs, but safety and costs are also important parts of doctors' values and even the FDA. So as you can see, these values will be important when determining what kind of our overall concept that we came up with that integrates and really takes into account these values and what is important to move on with our system.
Diving into values and technical requirements, we did a QFD analysis to arrive and rank out requirements for the system. To arrive at these, we made our initial list of values by going through each stakeholder as a team and writing down the 2 or 3 things that they cared about the most when it comes to our system. Once we had identified these, we consolidated them into a single list and established how much on a scale of 1 to 3 each stakeholder cared about each one of these values. We made our initial list of requirements by looking at each value in order of importance and aiming to quantify how this value could be ensured through our design specifications. Once we had identified these, we consolidated them into a single list and established how much on a scale of 1 to 3 each stakeholder cared about each one of all the requirements. We did this individually as each team member, and then we did the average when it came to numbers. On the left, we have a stakeholder to value QFD. We can see based on this that the top 3 values are health, safety, and cost. On the right, we have value to requirement QFD. We can see based on this that the top 3 requirements are cost, being cheap to manufacture and for the patient, efficacy, which must be high enough to be adopted, and valid data, which has to be valid data for it to be approved by the FDA. Our major conflicts are cost of safety. We must ensure the cost is as low as it can be without causing a significant health risk to the user. In order to solve this, we'll try to do government-private collaborations and other things to manipulate the costs to be as low as possible. Cost and health is another major conflict, which is essentially the same as cost and safety. Profit and cost is another conflict, which we must essentially find an equilibrium where the cost of production is at the level where the producer can still make a profit, while at the same time providing a good enough cost for the patient. And then a competition and cost conflict is also very common, which is kind of inevitable. The more competition leads to less freedom to control costs and the need to just adapt or lower what your competitors offer. Here we can see the main functional flow diagram of the cancer finder system at its highest level. The way it works is the device is inserted, it flows around the body searching. If no cancer is found, it continues searching, and if cancer is found, a type of nanobot, depending on the design that we decide, flags the cancer. The system then starts gathering data, assessing it, picking a treatment, and delivering it. While delivered, the effects on the cancer are monitored continuously. Now let's zoom into a second level functional flow diagram on how the system goes about attaching to cells and gathering that data. Here are 2 examples of the second level functional flow diagrams from before. On the left, we have how the system attaches to found cancers in the system. And on the right, we have how the system gathers data using the nanobots. For the sake of time, I won't go into detail about them, but this is a very high level function of how they would go about doing these functions. Now let's look at the high level functional block diagram of the cancer finder system. This diagram is based on a concept design where we have 2 types of robots, as we will explain after, and essentially one finder or flagger and another nanobot, which is the data gatherer and treater. In this case, we have 3 big blocks. The data gathering robot, which has its own processor, Bluetooth system to receive signal from other robots and send signal outside, sensors, and a battery, potentially a treatment stock if it's meant to deliver treatment. Second component, big box, is the flagging robot, which also has its own processor, Bluetooth system to send signal to other robots, different sensors, a battery, and a biomarker stock for flagging. And then we have the big data monitoring system, which is a computer, a communication system to talk to the robots, a data monitoring system, and different algorithms to process the data and make decisions. We also have an additional block that is complementary, which is the insertion device. We decided not to really explore too much in detail this part at this stage, given the design of it is fully dependent on how the robots are designed and how we want them to be inserted. The process we followed to arrive at our 2 top concepts was very similar to the process used in biodesign. We found a need area as described, then we described the need area in detail, and we carried out a brainstorming session together on all the different approaches or concepts we could use to tackle the need and the requirements. We all decided that a monitoring device that lives inside the patient would be the best way to do early detection and treatment for cancer. We also wanted data analysis to be a key component of our concept, so we incorporated data collection and analysis in informing the device. This is concept number 1. In this concept, there are 2 different types of nanobots inserted into the patient's bloodstream. One type is designated as the finder, whose sole purpose is to find and flag malignant tumors and cancers. Upon flagging the cancer, it continues through the body in search of more. The other nanobot is then activated and, using the flagging system of nanobot 1, begins the treatment of cancer. Treatment will be delivered from the bloodstream and will diffuse into the tumor through the blood vessels, just like any other cancer treatment. Given nanobots will only be able to flow through blood vessels, we are aiming to target tumors detectable near the bloodstream. This is concept number 2, which is very similar. Unlike the one before, there is only one type of nanobot in this system, designed to employ both the searching and the treating of the cancer. This nanobot is inserted again into the bloodstream of the patient and begins its search for malignant tumors and cancers. Upon finding one, it leaves the bloodstream to attach itself to the cancer and then begins treatment itself. Like the above, data about the patient, cancer treatment, and nanobot signals are sent to an app to interpret and analyze the data. Nanobots can be added in different parts of the body to maximize the search for cancers, such that each cancer is being treated. We want to add an app, as mentioned before, component to our concepts, where both the clinician and the patient would have access to real-time data and treatment development from both a phone and a web portal. We envision the patient side of the app to be more generalistic, with appointments, general info. We want to add an app component to our concepts, as mentioned before, where both the clinician and the patient would have access to real-time data and treatment development from both a phone and a web portal. We envision the patient side of the app to be more generalistic, with appointments, general info, and cancer progress and treatment reminders. Meanwhile, the doctor side of the app would be extremely detailed, with exact numbers on biomarkers, vitals, clinical records, etc. These are the system architectures for each of the concepts described before. Note that they are extremely similar, so I will just describe system 1 architecture. The system would essentially have a cancer detection system, which is comprised of the 2 types of nanorobots, 1 in system 2. A communication system, which will probably require both cellular for the app and Bluetooth between the bots. A data management system in charge of managing the contents from the app for doctors and patients, the data received from the bots, storing the data, etc. And a patient monitoring system, which would be a wearable or phone recording the data from the bots. In order to characterize the behavior of our system, if we were to build it, we have identified a series of key performance parameters to consider. Number 1 is safety. There are multiple components of our device that would have an impact on safety, such as the amount of radiation delivered, the presence of a foreign device in the body, and the effect on the vital signs of the patient. Testing this will require in vitro and in vivo studies. Cost is another factor, both to the patient and for production. To the patient, the device must be cheap enough that patients are willing to undergo treatment. To test that it's cheap enough, we would analyze the lifetime cost of diagnosis and treatment for cancer patients with this device versus the standard of care. For companies, the cost must be low enough to be produced in mass. To figure this out, we would do production and marketing and analytics. Research needs to be conducted on the current state of the economy, the resources available to create the system, and sources detailing how many people are interested or need a system such as this one. Biocompatibility is another big one, and we would have to carry out in vitro and in vivo studies for this. And then for the sake of time, I won't mention any others, but other performance parameters to consider are data, which must be statistically valid, success rate, efficacy rate, lifespan of the device, bandwidth, battery life, etc. Moving on to basic performance metrics, this include the speed at which cancer cells are found, percent of nanorobots successful in finding the cancer removal rates, and a plethora of probabilities regarding remission, other cancers, etc. Derived from algorithmic analysis of nanobots. Quantities of interest include cancer cells found per nanorobot, as well as the above metrics. Through analyzing this data, we're able to conclude the efficiency at which nanorobots function and can accordingly add or remove bots from a patient. We will see the efficacy of nanorobot treatment, and the algorithmic analysis will lead us to future prognosis and treatments of patients. The main performance equation we would be using to test and quantify how long it takes for the application to transfer data between the nanobot and the applications. To verify the amount, is the one described in this slide, and in order to verify the amount of detection and accuracy of the nanorobot's ability to detect cancer throughout the body, the statistical analysis of disease-oriented sampling would have to be considered.
So for our failure modes and effect analysis and risk identification and mitigation study, we started by finding the four most common or likely most common failure modes and proceeded by looking at which root subsystem they would happen in, what systems would be affected by a failure in each subsystem, the impact on the system as a whole, and the category of failure, and obviously the approach that we would take to mend this issue. The four main failure modes we found were the nanobot's inability to search the entire body, the nanobot's data is failed to cross-functionally send to other nanobots and or the interface. The flagging ability fails or runs out, so we can't diagnose tumors properly, or the cancer removal program doesn't work. And as you can see in our failure modes, we came with four main ideas that the problems would identify. So you see we have cancer stays, misdiagnoses, research problems, and idly waiting. For the first idea, when the inability to search the entire body, we see that the cancer stays because without the ability to search the entire body, we will not find all the tumors, and the physician in charge and or the nanobots will not be able to perform their duties. In that same vein, misdiagnoses will happen because if we don't find all the cancers in the body, the primary physician in charge may diagnose the patient with some type of cancer or some stage of cancer without being aware of all the data presented. Next, we have this data cross-functionality failure, which mostly leads to research problems, but can also lead to misdiagnoses. If the nanobots fail to send data appropriately to one another or fail to communicate, we see that information about the cancer and future research is compromised. Furthermore, if our flagging fails on an individual level, the nanobots won't be able to find the cancer if they are trying to remove it, and the physician will not be able to properly diagnose or make a prognosis or make an assertion about how to deal with the cancer in this case. So you see with the flagging fails, we have the cancer stays idea as well, and then there will be a lot of idly waiting. And the reason that there will be idly waiting in this case is because if the nanobots are searching the body and flagging is not happening, they will continue searching the body, doing nothing, as though this body is completely cancer-free. And finally, the last mode of failure that we found is this cancer removal failure, which is if we attempt to implement a cancer removal mechanism in the nanobots, you'll see that there will be a lot of idly waiting nanobots, and the cancer will obviously stay. The cancer will stay because you can't remove the cancer with the nanobots, and there will be a lot of idly waiting because as soon as the nanobots find a cancer that it can't remove, it'll continually try to remove it with no avail. So there's a couple of ways we can solve each problem. To begin with, for the nanobot inability to search the entire body, we can create like a fail-safe mechanism that checks for nanobots sticking in one location without moving, and then we can remove these bots and then re-implement them in the body if need be, if this mechanism arises. As for the cross-functionality and the data failure, we can, first of all, we need to research Bluetooth more, but besides just Bluetooth, we need to let the nanobots have the ability to attach to one another and share data almost manually instead of relying on fully wireless connections. For the flagging ability failing, we see that we can create a nanobot flag that asserts itself upon nanobot's inability to flag cancer. So when flagged, nanobot can either exit the body or mingle with other nanobots like I just mentioned and regain its flagging ability by being given some tool or data. And finally, if there is that removal failure, the final failsafe, or the final failure mode, there can be an internal clock with each nanobot that keeps track of the time spent at a particular tumor. And if that clock tells us that we were at this tumor for too long, we can continue searching throughout the body and signal this to the physician. This can tell us that the tumor is too large or too difficult to remove, to repair, and then the physician can go in, or a surgeon can go in and try to remove the tumor themselves. Next, for the risk analysis, we made a likelihood or consequence 5x5 matrix, the NASA matrix that we discussed in class. And we came up with 5 ideas again that would be important both to stakeholders from the QFD and also just function of our system and intended function. So these important ideas that we had in our matrix were performance as 1, patient safety as 2, cost 3, data gathering ability as 4, and time as 5. And then we looked at each idea uh, and how consequential it is. So you see for performance, at minimal consequence, we see that there's no real consequence to the overall goal. Perhaps some performance is lost, perhaps some time is lost, but the machine or the system functions as it is fully intended. Likewise, for consequence 2, there is minor consequences, not much is lost, maybe a data point or 2 here or there, or some negligible amount of time. At consequence 3, we already see some differences for performance, where this goal can be achieved but lacking some foundational data in that some particular nanobots perhaps aren't working, efficiency is clearly lost, and data isn't as ideal as we'd like it to, but the patient still gets out all right. Finally, then, or not finally, sorry, number 4, we see there's the ability or the inability to achieve multiple goals. Minimal function is still available, but here multiple nanobots are failing, the UI is failing, the physician is not able to diagnose or give a prognosis to the patient properly or remove the cancer fully. And finally, under consequence 5, there's an inability to complete all necessary or major tasks, and there's this failure of the system as a whole. The patient probably did not get healed. Then under patient safety, again, under consequence 1, we decided that there would be some minor aching or discomfort, perhaps the likes of which is seen at a dentist's office. Under consequence 2, we see perhaps some minimal training, first aid required for the patient. So something that would be equivalent to a minor scratch or a cut or a bruise. Under consequence 3, we have a clearly wounded patient, recovery time within the weeks, maybe even some paid time off from work for that patient. Under 4, we have a serious injury. Under 3 and 4 already, we start getting to situations where we do not want to harm the patient this much. They're taking months off. They're taking recovery time that is hindering not only their lives, but the progress of our system. And under 5, an unfortunate loss of life. Next, when we have cost, we see that the minimal consequence for cost is just a little bit too expensive, maybe a little bit too inexpensive in terms of the system making money. Under consequence 2, we see some minor consequence. Investors would be maybe less likely to partake in our idea if they see that the idea isn't as fiscally enticing. Under 3, we see production decline. We have not enough funding. We can't actually explore the system or get data as we want. Furthermore, under 4, we'll get too expensive for the masses. We won't have enough research. People won't be investing. This will be a flop very quickly. And under 5, we'll just have the inability completely to produce and keep systems running. No one will be using our systems. Investors won't be investing at all, and the masses probably won't hear of them. Next, under our data gathering ability, similar to performance, there's going to be minimal data loss and irrelevant data under consequence 1. Something that won't hinder research, won't hinder the ability to remove the cancer, and won't hinder a prognosis from the physician in charge. Furthermore, we're going to have some minor data loss, perhaps hindering a little bit of research, but the research is still being done at a high level, and the research and data being given and analyzed by our system is useful. Under consequence 3, we see that data will be lost, patient can still be healed, but future studies are taking a hit. Perhaps the system is already being phased out at this point because the research isn't as plentiful as other systems. Under 4, we have future research will be unknown. We're losing too much data. Patients are almost unwilling to partake in this system unless they have no other choice because there is so little research being done and being able to be done by it. And lastly, we have, just this failure to heal the patient. We don't have enough data from each nanobot. We don't have enough data going forward. Research completely flops. Investors will not be investing, and the system will not be running. And then finally, under time, we decided time was important because under a situation like cancer, time is of the essence in saving one's life. So no time loss under one, excellent, or minimal, like seconds, minutes, perhaps even hours. No time loss, really. The patient is willing to wait then for take some time under two, maybe a couple days, but nothing that will completely ruin the patient's life or cause them an untimely death. Under consequence three, we have this idea that it takes a fair bit of time. The patient may look into other avenues of cancer detection or removal, such as existing ones like chemotherapy, even though they take long. Let's start saying that our system is at the same time level as chemotherapy here. Under consequence four, it takes quite a lot of time, and this option is taken only if there is no other choice, so it takes even longer than chemotherapy using all these nanobots. And finally, under consequence five, this takes so much time that it is a waste to use the system because we can't detect the cancer or heal it in time to save the patient.
So for cost estimations and drivers, when we look at one component, which would be the research and development, we see that a lot goes into that. So in this chart, you can see that research and development as a whole has many different parts to it, such as like the research and development, the concept prototyping, the actual development and the testing, and just each team and considering what each person is doing and all the costs. So after going through that and kind of like how many people would we have working on this? Would it be the same engineers in one team as the other? And determining all that, we came up that it would be about 900,000 that we would need in order to do the research and development portion, which would be part of the non-reoccurring value cost of our system. Then we went on and tried to estimate the cost of our app that we would be using to communicate with between the doctor and the patient and the body and the nanorobot. So we found that based on what we wanted to do, that this would end up costing us 463,482. And this would be part of the non-reoccurring portion of it. Because once we develop the app, we do have to maintain it, but to develop the app, that would be the cost. So here I have a chart of the rest of the non-reoccurring and reoccurring parts, and as you can see, it's just like the machines for the non-reoccurring part, just establishing a place to manufacture and keep building the nanorobots as we need them, and then the recurring one is just like the assembly that is required to continue production, customer service in case anything goes wrong, continual app maintenance, and just fabrication. So we end up seeing that the non-recurring cost would be 2,300,483, while the total recurring cost would be 1,432,000. And that just leads to other issues that come up besides cost.
So some other issues we found for this system um, are education, our team studying these technologies, funding from investors, and this idea of how long the system will be viable in and of itself. So firstly, for education, we see that we need people to be willing to use a product. So we need to educate them about the safety of the system. We need to educate them about nanobots. We need to educate them and ourselves about Bluetooth and how they work within the confines of the body and what potential issues may arise when everything is happening in such a small level in vivo. And how, in that same vein for education, how does our system differ from current cancer detection or removal methods such as chemotherapy, as I mentioned earlier. Furthermore, for our settings of technologies, we're going to need to perform clinical trials using all the technologies described above, including the app, including the nanobots and the Bluetooth, and find out the long-term effects of close-range Bluetooth radiation. There's not actually many studies out right now that detail this, but if this system were to be used in practice, we need to know. We haven't talked a lot about funding because it was kind of outside the scope, past like the QFD is what investors want, but we need to realize and show investors what our system versus current systems currently are, benefits versus chemotherapy, for instance, the most prevalent cancer detection and removal and healing system so far. And then to a lesser extent, how would we market this system? I think this kind of goes hand in hand with education and showing people the safety of it and the effectiveness. And if people are willing to buy into it, then investors should be as well. And lastly, how long will the system be viable? Because if we are using such advanced technologies such as in vivo Bluetooth and nanobots that can all communicate and analyze data through a UI that a physician manages, how long will this system be viable if we've already reached this, such advanced technologies? If this system is viable only for a year or two after being produced, is that even worth it if we're going to come up with something much, much stronger?
So in conclusion, we see that the system is very viable as applications that communicate with patients and doctors already exist, and as well as Bluetooth systems and medical framework and data manipulation of patients and doctors. So the part of the application that might require further investigation would include insurance costs and possible payment methods, because as of now we haven't accounted for that in the app. So that is a possible feature that we could add where patients are able to even access and see what their insurance covers on demand and in the application. And just as we know that in the future, as technology advances, there might be changes to the materials that we'll make to make it even more cost efficient or more effective. And also just in general, so far we have two different methods that we're thinking about. So one way would be that we have nanorobots that monitor and treat cancer patients. So we just release a bunch of these robots and they do kind of a dual performance where they monitor and they treat it. But then the second method would be you have half of the robots that are just constantly monitoring and half of the robots that are constantly treating it or as needed. So that would be also something that we would have to figure out as we see the results and as we continue to progress in this project. So thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and you guys are excited, and hope you guys are staying healthy and have a great day.